We're back! So, if you don't know what we're doing here, we're going back through all the original episodes of Ben 10. That's Ben 10 Classic for you reboot fans. Get out of here. No, don't go. Don't actually go. The reboot's fine. It's fine, okay? Really, it's fine. It's just not this. Please stay. Don't go. The reboot's fine. So, last time, I forgot to mention that with the 3 aliens we saw in that episode, we are up to 7 out of 10 of the original playlist. And we'll check back in with that at the end of this one and see how far we're at. This time, we're on episode 3, which is titled The Krakken. So, let's bust out the rum and expect to get wet. I'll start off by saying I get what they were doing here with all the references and stuff, but this is the first episode doing this that I've just kind of wanted it to be over, and I'm kind of glad it is now. We open on Ben doing a cannonball, as kids are wont to do, and then he brags on his jump and asks Gwen to join him, but she declines on the grounds that the water is gross, which, fair. He then splashes her, and she calls him a slur that was probably okay to say in 2006, but who knows. Ben pretends to drown to scare Gwen, and then he pops out of the lake as swamp-bending forearms and scares her even more. Gwen goes to tattle, and Ben just laughs it off, but then he sees a monster in the lake and gets cliffhangered by the intro. If you see him, you might be in for a big surprise. He'll turn into an alien before your very eyes. Anyway, Ben gets tossed around by what turns out to be the Krakken, and manages to escape somehow and immediately goes to whine to Grandpa Max. Gwen and Grandpa Max, being half asleep, kind of just brush him off and totally ignore him. Early the next morning, Ben and company are heading out to go fishing, but he's still trying to convince them that he saw a monster last night, and no one is believing him. Gwen, who's apparently grossed out by worms, decides to stay behind on the fishing trip. Max introduces himself and Ben to Shaw, the gruff-looking captain of their fishing boat. This seems to be a reference to Robert Shaw, the actor who played Quint in the classic Jaws. Shaw rushes them aboard, and they take off. Shaw makes an ominous comment about how much there is to catch in this lake, and Ben hangs over the side of the boat, looking for the lake monster. He thinks he's finally seen it, but in classic lake monster fashion, it turns out to be some driftwood and some debris. Go figure. Grandpa Max tries to remind Ben that they're here to murder fish, not monsters, but Shaw says it's not a monster, it's called the Krakken. That's with 2 Ks, by the way. It said it in the title, but the subtitles confirm. Don't know why they did 2 Ks, but they did. Shaw elaborates that there's been sightings of this monster on this lake for hundreds of years, but nobody believes him and everyone calls him crazy. That reminds me, I've got a working theory about lake monsters that involves time travel, but that's more of an Outlander theory than a Ben 10 one. Shaw offers to personally escort Ben and Max out to a place where he's actually seen this monster, and in the same breath questions their manhood and offers adventure. Grandpa looks real skeptical, but the shiny, hopeful look on Ben's face convinces him that it might be worth the trip. Shaw shows Ben and Max a bunch of fancy equipment he has to track this Krakken, and I assume it's all stolen, because there is no way the captain of a dinky little fishing boat like this can afford all this equipment and still afford to eat too. Grandpa shows off a bit of his judgy side and tells Ben not to listen to Shaw because he thinks he's crazy, and Ben is rightfully a little bit offended because he too has seen this Krakken with his own eyes. Shaw pulls his boat up to an area that's been roped off and has a bunch of do not enter signs. He gets unreasonably upset, but then Grandpa Max counters with a really waspy comment about how it looks real official and they should probably listen to it. He's really not showing his best side in this episode, is he? Shaw and Grandpa start arguing, but they get interrupted by some apparent fish hippie called Jonah. He rolls up, or should I say floats up, in this fancy-ass boat and tells them that this area is closed for an environmental study. It's at this point that I start thinking his goatee and his boat are way too cool for his story. Something fishy's going on here. Shaw is all for saying screw the rules, but Grandpa, as the one with the money, says they will not, in fact, be screwing the rules. Ben says, "What about the Krakken?" And all the fish hippies over on Jonah's boat just laugh hysterically right in Ben's little face. They claim to be marine biologists, call Ben crazy, and then dip. Later on, the oddly shaped sonar Shaw has on his boat starts beeping obnoxiously. His eyes light up. He knows it's the Kraken. Ben and Max see it. They see it's headed for the dock, and they immediately start panicking about Gwen. Gwen sits on the dock, all tra-la-la-la-la, not noticing that a boat and a monster are speeding right for her, and then she gets fake-out cliffhangered by a commercial. Or not, if you purchase these like I did. Or if you stream them. Anyway, Gwen thinks it's Ben messing with her again. Way to go, Ben. Way to go. So she doesn't get out of the way, and the monster smashes the dock, and Gwen and a bunch of other people end up in the lake. Max tells Ben to go rescue everyone. Ben tries to cue up Ripjaws, who we haven't seen yet, by the way. But instead, the Omnitrix gives him Accelerate, which I guess ends up working anyway. He stumbles a little bit at first, but Accelerate manages to run fast enough to stay on top of the water. He runs out to rescue everyone, starting with Gwen, and as he turns around for more people, he kicks sand in her face. Kind of a dick move, but I'll allow it. Jonah's boat tries to flee, but gets a nice Kraken backhand. The Kraken goes to finish them off, but Accelerate scares her off with a sweet spin move. Or so you think. She pops up on the other side of the boat and snags a crate. Probably not important, right? But Accelerate slides under her throat and gives it a vicious machine gun kick, actually scaring her away this time. Not! Jonah makes a bad pun and a worse excuse, then Miss Kraken pops back up and snags the crate. The Omnitrix begins to time out, so Accelerate takes off, doesn't quite make it, and ends up skipping on his face and landing just short of Shaw's boat. Grandpa Max demands that Shaw turns his attention to rescuing Ben, and more likely, maybe probably on purpose, prevents him from harpooning the Kraken. Back at camp, Ben shivers in notably not a Snuggie, while all the other campers retreat to safety. Even though the Kraken is 100% confirmed now, Grandpa Max is still showing some serious hate for Shaw for, no reason, and it's kind of made me come full circle on believing Shaw and all his crazy stories, which I guess are real because we saw the Kraken. Grandpa thinks that the fish hippies should be in charge of dealing with the Kraken, but Ben retorts that as wielder of the Omnitrix, it should be up to him, and they kind of move on without resolving that argument at all. Captain Shaw shows up at their camp somewhat randomly and starts yelling what would probably be obscenities if this aired at 9 p.m. instead of 4. He says that the fish hippies have closed the lake and he is just not having it. Sometime, much, much later, Gwen and Grandpa discover that Ben is not in fact taking a dump, but he has disappeared. Probably as an alien, probably chasing an alien. Or a lake monster, I guess. Shaw is speeding out towards where he thinks the Kraken is when he discovers that Ben has stowed away on his boat. He makes the very poor adulting decision to let Ben stay aboard and help with the hunt. Shaw starts suiting up to be bait. Ben says he can help, but Shaw blows him off and says he wants to bait solo. Wait. Down in the water, Shaw gets jump scared by seaweed, and then again by Ben, and then they find a spherical object in a pile of debris. Shaw is suddenly dragged to the surface by some shiny dudes who are definitely not the fake-ass fish hippies. They question him sharply, but he does not give up any information. The shiny dudes demask, and surprise! It's Jonah and friends. Fake-ass hippies. They kidnap Shaw, and Ben has to watch impotently from the sideline because his Omnitrix has not yet recharged. Jonah makes an offhand comment about how there are probably more eggs, and then he goes mad excessive and blows up Shaw's boat. The not actually fish hippies flee, just as the Omnitrix signals a full charge. And Ben declares catchphrase, hero time! Stinkfly chases Jonah's boat and is greeted by hostility, Superman quotes, and many, many bullets. Stinkfly stink juices all of Jonah's support, but Jonah's a butthead and manages to blow up the water, causing Stinkfly to be too wet to fly. Jonah tries very hard to murder Stinkfly, but Stinkfly manages to use a technique that I think would make Spider Monkey proud to save himself last second. Jonah then tries very hard to murder Shaw, but Stinkfly saves him just in time. Grandpa Max is worrying aloud about Ben when Deus Ex Omnitrix drops Ben and Shaw right into his lap via the awning of the rust bucket. Later on, Ben is ranting about how the Kraken had a whole nest full of eggs and that Jonah must be stealing them. Gwen, having done some any research discovers that, yeah, Jonah is not in fact a fish hippie, but some sort of shady poacher who sells rare animals for big sums of cash. Somebody says the word crate, and it gives Ben his episodical Dr. House moment. He realizes what must have been in the crate and how Jonah's scheme works. Ben directs everyone to the cannery, and Gwen plays narc. Team Tennyson hops aboard Shaw's second boat? My god, how does he afford this crap? And they steal it before Shaw manages to get aboard. Elsewhere on the lake, we see Jonah in a pilaf-flavored robot. He's resurfacing with another egg, bringing their total to 2, apparently. He makes a really bad pun, and then brags about how much money he's going to make selling unborn children. Team Tennyson arrives. Gwen and Grandpa climb up a ladder to confront Jonah, while Ben Sailor Moons into actually Ripjaws this time. Ripjaws is a Piscus Valan. He's got big, hungry teeth, and he swims good. The Krakken bursts back up through the dock, attempting to get her eggs back, and Jonah sees this as a business opportunity. He hops back in his robot and is gonna, stuff it into a jar, I guess? Jonah and his morons shoot at the Kraken to very little effect. Jonah flees higher via some wire and keeps trying to shoot at it, but Ripjaws bursts out of the dock and just knobs the gun right off of his arm. He frees the jar from Jonah's grasp, and it falls and smashes on the dock, but the eggs don't quite roll into the water. Elsewhere on the dock, Grandpa and Gwen are surprised by a bad guy. But after some quick thinking and a classic cliche from Grandpa Max, they zipline over one bad guy and straight into the face of another one. Back at the plot, Jonah and Ripjaws are taking turns punching the crap out of each other, while Mama Krakken manages to rescue her eggs. Jonah almost manages to snatch them back from her, but he is just no match for Ripjaws, plus Kraken, plus Anchor. Ripjaws ends up with both eggs, and he rushes them back to their nest. Ms. Krakken destroys the mech suit, and nearly and rightfully devours Jonah, but Ripjaws steps in because guess it's the right thing to do. Blech. Ripjaws knocks Jonah the hell out, and then leaves him strung up for the cops. We get a last bit of comedy with Shaw thinking he's captured the monster, but before he can look twice, the Omnitrix times out, and he sees that it is in fact Ben in his net. We see Mama Krakken looking very happy to have her eggs back, and then roll credits! So we only got one new alien this time, making our total 8 out of 10 of the originals we've seen so far. But Ripjaws is the current water type, which is, mad important. So this is an important one, but, like I said earlier, it's not necessarily my favorite. I couldn't say what's wrong with it, necessarily, but it's just not my favorite. It's okay. This episode exists, and I will let it exist, even if I turn into Alien X. So, do the things, and hopefully check back next week for some more. Catch you later.